All right. So it's 2 o'clock. Let's try to be a little timely, right? Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Ashanti Jones. I'm here with Schoolhouse Connection, and we're here with our policy fellow, Dr. Deidre Thomas Murray, from your very own Missouri community, to talk about student homelessness and what Missouri communities can really do about it. And so again, thank you for your time and joining us today. And a little bit about Schoolhouse Connection and what we do and why we're hosting this type of webinar. So Schoolhouse Connection itself is a national nonprofit organization that really works to overcome youth homelessness through educational access. And so what we do as an organization is provide strategic support, strategic advocacy, practical assistance, to schools, early childhood programs, institutions of higher education, service providers, families, and the young people who are impacted by youth homelessness. And so my role at the Schoolhouse Connection is as a senior policy and advocacy manager, where I work alongside my colleague Rod Mons, who's joining us as well in a supportive role, to really move this work forward in each individual state. And you can find out more about who we are and what we do by visiting our website, schoolhouseconnection.org, or if you have any specific questions, you can always email us at info@schoolhouseconnection.org. And so we do federal policy as well as state advocacy. We also answer questions that you guys will send to that email address and post it on our website. We host webinars like the one that you're attending today and other implementation tools to give everyone the opportunity to do their own individual advocacy wherever they may be. We also work very closely with young people who have been impacted by youth homelessness and provide them resources, right? And we do that through both our youth policy core and our youth leadership and scholarship program. And so the reason why we brought you all here today is to share the work that our policy fellows have done. And so our policy fellows are a group of really passionate and really incredible people from communities all around the country that are mobilized to really connect allies and other advocates to this work, right? To do the legislative advocacy necessary at both the federal and the state levels to ensure that young people who are experiencing homelessness have the resources that they need to continue their education and to be successful beyond that. And so the policy fellow from Missouri is your very own Dr. Deidre Thomas Murray, who I will allow to introduce herself now.
Good morning and happy Friday. I am Dr. Deidre Thomas Murray. I coordinate homeless and foster care services for St. Louis Public Schools. And I'm also a board member of Gateway 180 Homeless Shelter. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about the policy fellow at this point.
You can talk a little bit about your experience.
Okay, and so I was contacted by Schoolhouse Connections. They saw the need for advocates in the area of legislation. And I, along with probably about 25 other folk, was selected to be the representative for St. Louis, for Missouri, really. And so it is an honor to share. And hopefully when you leave this presentation, you'll leave with a zeal to make a difference in understanding and educating others about understanding that all policy and practices are not good. We work with a unique population, and unfortunately, this population comes with a lot of stigmatism and stereotypical beliefs. And our goal is to dismantle that and make sure that these children experience seamless access to a free and appropriate public education. And not just education, but also the social emotional piece and the medical piece to make these students a better version of what people believe them to be and to prove them wrong, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, that introduction to yourself and your experience with the Policy Fellows Program, Deidre. And so I just want to, before we hop into the context of this webinar, just to give you all a chance to know how you can interact with us. And so we know that you're not necessarily on screen and can't, come off mute, but you can share any thoughts, comments, or questions in the Q&A or the chat box. And as we stop throughout the presentation at multiple points, we'll be able to try to answer as many of those as we can. If we're not able to answer those questions within the context of this webinar, we'll try our best to make sure that you get that answer at some point after. So thank you for that. And so our agenda today, we'll just welcome you as we just did, right? And then we'll talk about student homelessness and why it's an issue across our country and how it plays out in Missouri. And then we'll talk about some of the ways that you can activate yourselves and your networks and your families and your workplaces to actually do something about this problem on the federal and state level. All right, so this number here, 1.1 million young people who are students are experiencing homelessness. And a few years ago, that number was a little bit higher, right? But unfortunately, there was already a strain on people who were actually doing the identification and connection to services for young people who are experiencing homelessness. But unfortunately, due to the pandemic and all of the other issues that were kind of happening on the national landscape, a lot of young people kind of fell through the cracks. And so this is not to say that there are not more than 1.1 million young people experiencing homelessness in the country. But we need the resources to be able to successfully identify and track them. And so many schools, even before the pandemic, and of course afterwards, have experienced challenges with identifying and communicating with students who are experiencing homelessness. And so the goal of a lot of the policies that we'll talk about today and the work that Deidre and the other policy fellows are doing are to kind of really bolster the resources that are available to educational institutions and advocates to support finding young people. And so typically, when we think about homelessness, the first thing that may come to our minds are the people that we see on our street corners or outside and unhoused in that way. But thanks to advocacy, we're actually able to expand the definition of homelessness to include all of these other things that we don't typically associate with homelessness. So things like staying in a motel, right? Whether it's paid by a parent or some sort of social service agency, that's considered homelessness, right? Staying with other people, right? Living on a couch. Not necessarily having a home, to call your own, at least under your name, maybe having to hop from auntie's house to grandma's house, all of those things, staying at a shelter or domestic violence shelter, anything like that, couch surfing or living doubled or tripled up. All of these things are considered homelessness by our federal definitions. And so it's really important that we have these conversations with folks like yourselves so that we are able to identify that it is not just people who are living on the street and are visibly unhoused that are experiencing homelessness. And so I'm going to turn it over to Deidre for a moment here, just to talk about how homelessness in this context really plays out in Missouri.
Thank you. So in St. Louis, we have consistently served close to 5,000 homeless students, even with the revisions to the law. And in the past, the law captured folk living in transitional housing, and it also included foster care. And both of those have been removed from the McKinney-Vento. And so in our district, we have, as of January 2020, identified 4,771 students as homeless. We have families living unsheltered in hotel motels, doubled up, and we're seeing an increasing number of high school students who are experiencing homelessness. I do not think we captured this in our presentation, but there's a population, the unaccompanied youth. Those youth are referenced as runaways and throwaways. They may have left home by choice, or they may have been asked to leave. And so really the purpose of this webinar is advocacy. And so in many instances, we want to bring our own ideas to the table. But the law is clear. It defines homelessness as children who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, whether they were asked to leave or they left on their own. They are identified as homeless. It's not our business to get in their business and say, you have a place to stay, why don't you go back home, or you're not really homelessness. Ms. Jones referenced some of the challenges. And so with the fixed, regular, and adequate, in many instances, we have families living doubled up. Our numbers in St. Louis City, the percentages are similar to the state of Missouri's percentages. And so to my point, we have a large population and we need more advocates. A lot of times we want to bring the judgment, give a life sentence. I encourage you to be the doctor and help heal. When children do not have parental or familiar guidance, they're out there on their own. And it's so important for school liaisons to link with these children, be their voice, be their representative. And the law kind of speaks to that if you've ever combed through it. But that's one of our at-risk populations. We found students sleeping outside of the schools. School is the safest place for children and they seek refuge there. So I was speaking about the doubled up piece. And so it may not be just doubled up, because they may be doubled up in a house that has the capacity to meet the number of people in the home. But that substandard, fixed, regular, and adequate, adequate speaks to the substandard piece. So if there's outside elements coming into the home, a hole in the roof, mold, or lead, that's substandard housing. And so we just want you to look at the law through the lens of some of the experiences that our young people are having. During my homelessness, we had 15 people in a 2-bedroom house. That's substandard housing. And so if they do not have utilities, it's substandard housing. And so we just want you to look through the lens of identifying them. Once you identify them, they are homeless for the entire school year. And I just think that that piece is important to say, even if they find stable housing after their challenges. So I don't know if you want me to go, I can talk about homelessness forever.
Yeah, no, thank you for that context. So, to what you're saying, right, Deidre, you were mentioning how important the educational institution, right, the school building in itself is important to young people. And that's not just theoretically or, emotionally, it's actually true, right? There's such an impact on homelessness and its relationship to education. In order to ensure that young people who are experiencing homelessness are not homeless again as adults, education is kind of the key to that, right? Being able to achieve an adequate education and be able to move forward with a career, right? And that sort of stability is really what our advocacy really speaks to. And so 42% of children who have experienced homelessness have dropped out of school at least one time, right? And 60%, and this is pretty self-explanatory, but of course it's hard, to stay in school while you're homeless, because there's so many other issues that accompany homelessness, right? Including, hygiene issues and, ability to complete homework, all of those things. And so homelessness in itself is associated with an 87% likelihood of dropping out of school, being chronically absent, and a disproportionate touches with school discipline practices, right? And so when we're not able to identify that young people are homeless, and they're not necessarily able to identify that they are homeless, it's difficult to make accommodations for them within your school discipline practices, right? And so it's really important that those definitions that we talked about a little bit earlier are kind of implemented in our approach to dealing with young people who are experiencing those issues. And so the achievement gap between homelessness and young people who are actually low income, it really does persist and is exacerbated, okay? And it may even worsen over time. And so it's really important that we make sure that our young people are getting their high school diplomas or, their equivalent degrees, because education is the single most important risk factor for youth adult homelessness. Okay, 346% is not a percentage to scoff at. It's telling a very, very pertinent story here, that education is really the key to young people being able to escape the clutches of homelessness. And so more than two-thirds of jobs that we have in our economy, which all of you know, right, requires some form of post-secondary education, whether that's a technical school, a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, whatever that may be. The majority of jobs and those options, that young people can have to escape youth homelessness and escape young adult homelessness is based on those jobs, right? And so we have to ensure that we're doing what we can to make sure that they have access to that. And so one of the key things that we've been advocating for is the McKinney-Vento Act. And that's one of the foremost important strategies to overcome homelessness. And it's very much important while we're still, at the tail end, but still within a pandemic. And so education in the McKinney-Vento Act. So the McKinney-Vento Act is really important because it removes these barriers by making sure that young people who are experiencing homelessness or unaccompanied are staying in the school that they were always in, right? Their school of origin, making sure that transportation is not a barrier, to making sure that they stay at that school. So let's say, for example, they were in a school in a district, but they don't have stable housing, so they may be staying somewhere else. They're able to actually get transportation through the McKinney-Vento Act to make sure that they're consistently at school and they're maintaining attendance at the school that they're most familiar with. Also, when that young person maybe needs to, go to another school district, right? Immediate enrollment is possible. There will not be a severe gap in between the time they left their last school and enrolling in the new school. And also making sure that there are structures in place to make sure that young people are supported all throughout their high school, their K-12 career and beyond that as well. And so the definition of homelessness, which we talked about a little bit before, has been expanded through the McKinney-Vento Act as well. And so young people who lack that fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence includes people who, share housing due to maybe an eviction or any other kind of substandard event, economic hardship, losing a job, which was something that was very common throughout the pandemic. A lot of people were laid off or fired or, experiencing unemployment. And even though most places did moratoriums on evictions, that was not permanent. It was a temporary solution. And so that those hardships did force people to kind of double up with one another. Young people who were living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or any kind of camping grounds as well are identified under, McKinney-Vento. And so as you see, there's a large number of young people who are identified as, living doubled up and sharing housing, 77%, and 8% of those young people were living in motels as well. And so, of course, shelters and any kind of transitional housing accounts for this as well. And 11% of students were eligible for McKinney-Vento under that provision. And so, living in your car, an abandoned building, those regular, occurrences of homelessness that we typically see, of course, count under the McKinney-Vento as well. And so there is guidance, federal guidance that you can check out. And of course, you'll get this presentation afterwards. We can actually click some of these links, but yeah, you'll be able to see the guidance on what counts under McKinney-Vento as well. And so I'm going to turn it over here to just talk about the Missouri context a bit. And Deidre, you can take it away.
Okay, gonna move this over a little bit. I didn't know if we put the main themes of the law in our presentation. And so I just wanna, is it in here? Do you know? If not, it's no big deal, but it speaks to what Ashanti was saying. The main themes are identification. You can't serve them if you don't know who they are. School access, they have the right to immediately enroll. We understand folk need records, but when the law says immediately enroll, that means they have the right to sit in a classroom and participate in the educational experience. School stability, Ashante talked about that. They can enroll where they are or go back to their school of origin. That child-centered best interest piece, I think it's important that we talk about that. And so we hear from the family, we hear from the attending district and the residing district. That's how decisions are made. And then they have the right to recovery of credits. If you know a kid is entering school and they're lacking, usually the school counselors go through the ICAP with the students. I just think this part isn't important to say. It's the liaison's responsibility to facilitate ensuring that these students have access to credit recovery and not losing anything because of their homeless experience. I hate to start out with one of my saddest stories first, but it's a good story in one sense. So we had the federal moratorium on evictions. And so this was a good thing. We partnered with the Sheriff's Office of the City of St. Louis, as well as EHOC, the Equal Opportunity Housing Council, to provide guidance and support to families experiencing evictions. But the partnership with the Sheriff's Office was an effort to keep children off the street. And so we created a flyer, and I don't know if we can skip to it and bounce back. And so on the flyer, it just shows how St. Louis Public Schools can assist these families. And so when the sheriff would go to serve the eviction, they would be provided a card and instructed to contact the school district for if they had school-aged children. And I was sharing with Ashanti and Rod, we had a family, and this is why advocacy is so important. We had a family being served an eviction, but there was a language barrier. And so they brought out an interpreter, but the interpreter did not speak the language the father spoke. And the police ended up being called. And this unarmed man ended up gunned down because of the language barrier. And so it's important for school districts, when we put stuff out, to make sure we have the right people at the table to be able to disseminate information in a language in which these families speak. You can go back to the next slide. So that was a partnership that we had during as the moratorium on evictions ended. And so the back to school resource fair, we try to do stuff that's preventive and things that will keep students in school. And so I ended up in St. Louis homeless by way of Hurricane Katrina, and I've been here ever since. And so when I first got here, I didn't have any family, any friends. And I started going into the shelters on my birthday to feel like I had a sense of community. Well, that was the start to a wonderful experience for children and families. And I'm like, I'm just at one shelter. And of course, that was Gateway 180. And I ended up bringing the back to school fair to the Board of Education. And I partnered with Children's Hospital, Vision. I ended up getting kids all sorts of medical support, immunizations, dental exams. health screening, physicals, whatever they needed to stay in school. And so the medical buses would park around our Board of Education, and families would be served. Students who would ordinarily be put out because they lacked these things and failed to meet the deadline. And so we brought the services to families as an effort to ensure that they started school on time with the necessary supports. And so what's interesting is, as the event got bigger, they didn't see it as a homeless event. They were like, Miss Deidre, we come to your birthday party. And so it was framed as my birthday party. And you know, it's just such a good feeling knowing we can get students in school and on time. And so other people in the community started coming out with book bags, school supplies, face painting, just different stuff, activities to give them a feel-good moment. You know, I remember sitting in a meeting and somebody spoke about the homelessness, getting their hair done and their nails done, as if they were not entitled to do it or feel good. It's okay for you to feel good, but it's not okay for the poor. And I had a problem with that. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. You can go back to the slide, Ashanti. I can't remember what was next.
Just before you hop back to that, I just want to lift up right here in this moment as you're talking about the health fair and immunizations and medical access. It's really great, and I want to applaud you for bringing that to St. Louis Public Schools, just because around the country we're facing similar issues where young people who are unaccompanied and homeless cannot consent for medical treatment, right? Cannot consent for the immunizations, cannot consent, for medical care. And so a little bit of the work that Schoolhouse does on the advocacy front is to ensure that we're supporting states and ensuring that young people who are unaccompanied can access this type of really important care, to make sure that medical records and their immunizations are not a barrier to them being able to excel to and through school.
Okay, so this is another partnership we had with the city of St. Louis, the mayor's office, and our students in transition office disseminated. So we were just a host spot for them, and we provided the support seamlessly. And the city's focus really was on our unaccompanied youth and our families who did not have an address. And so they were awarded a $500 cash card. We may have, through St. Louis Public, processed over 700, close to 800 families and students. But I think we may have successfully served about 500. And so I encourage liaisons to look for those partnerships. The city is where decisions are made and funding is disseminated. And so I just encourage you, and those in the state of Missouri or wherever you are, to look and maximize those types of opportunities. I had some information on Gateway 180. Y'all know I love Gateway 180. I did not live in that shelter during my homelessness, but it's one of the largest shelters in the city of St. Louis. And annually, we serve close to 500 families. And that's not totaling the individuals, but the families. And so what I love is 75% of our families have been rehoused since October. I'm talking about the calendar year from January through October. And that's such a wonderful thing. And the blessed part about the shelters You know, we have this challenge with accessing affordable housing, but the shelters provide our students with an address. And so it's difficult to enroll, provide transportation, or any support when families do not have an address. And of course, we're creative and we come up with ways when they do not have stable housing to provide them, the parent and the child, with a bus card, a bus pass, and just making sure that they have access. And so the shelters are non-truancy shelters. Once these families show up with students or children, school-age students, the shelter require them to enroll. It's a part of their process. And so at Gateway 180, they have what's called case managers and intake workers. So my staff is assigned to so many schools. And so families attending a particular school, they have consistency. They get the same staff anytime a new student enrolled. So, but they're required to be in school. And periodically there are families who choose to homeschool. Gateway 180 has the capacity and the technological support to provide that. In the past, when I've written grants, and I've recently received a grant, we try to make sure if the parent or the student, if they need access to a laptop or computers, we put those items into the shelter. And so in many instances, when our families are rehoused, they do not have furniture. And so through the grant, I'm able to provide students with air mattresses who become permanently housed. And so those are other benefits. The shelter has, they also do the birthday joy. So once a month, there's birthday parties for the students, and whatever way we're able to support, we support, because we can't, they can't learn if they're lacking. And so it just makes sense to send the dollars where we know our students are. There's reading programs. Through my grant recently, I bought books and divided them through the domestic violence shelters and Gateway 180. And so they also have a reading program that's sponsored by Nike, and Julius Anthony and Asia Owens. They come out and read and do poetry and just share, giving students outlets. If they're holding on to something, they can write about it, they can read about it, they can talk about it. And so there's a whole lot going on at Gateway 180, but I'm gonna keep it moving. And so every year we do an adopt a basket. I don't know if that's on there, where we try and provide meals to at least 100 families. We also do provide contactless giveaways as a result of the pandemic. So we have the Winter Wonderland giveaway where we give away coats. You know, one of the unique things about homelessness, and it bothers me when folk bring a whole lot of judgment. It was like, we just gave them a uniform, or we just gave them a coat. Well, guess what happened? They no longer have it. A lot of times when these families are put out of where they're residing, they never say, hey, come and get your belongings. They just put them out. And so when they ask for stuff repeatedly, give it to them. You know, it's not like they're going to open up a shop and sell it. Yeah. So if a kid is in need of uniforms or clothing, sometimes, and even if you're a non-uniform school, sometimes that's all these students have to wear. And so I just encourage folks to be mindful of that. I couldn't see what was at the bottom.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deidre. But just in the interest of time,
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to encourage participants to, right here on the bottom of this slide is Deidre's email, and you can share it again in the chat. If you're more interested in some of the specific programs, that you're pioneering in St. Louis. And I also want to encourage folks that as we move into the next part of this presentation, which focuses on some of the legislative things that we've been doing with both the policy fellows and the work with trying to expand access to McKinney-Vento and all of the other, legislative provisions for young people experiencing homelessness. Please write all of your questions in the chat, and we'll be sure to address them either, as we go. Rod's doing an excellent job so far with handling questions as they come in, but we'll also have a few minutes, I'm hoping at the end, just to answer some questions in real time. But we'll move forward here. And so the work that we do is really about the legislature, right? Making sure that we're putting policies and laws in place to ensure that there is some bipartisan, commitment to our young people. And so the dynamics of the Congress right now is pretty split, right? Where we have 221 Democrats and 214 Republicans. And so president in the House and then in the Senate, it's really 50-50, right? And so it's really important that when you try to get legislation passed, that you're trying to get bipartisan support. And so our policy fellows have been doing some of that bipartisan legislative advocacy, where they've been lifting up the concerns that we've had locally around youth homelessness and their access to education. And so Deidre has done some of those meetings as well with both our Republicans and our Democrats, just to make sure that this is everyone's problem, right? And so bipartisan efforts are very, very, very important. So those of you on this call who may be a constituent in some of the more Republican areas in Missouri, don't feel shy about contacting your legislator about representing these interests as they represent yours. And so some of our top legislative priorities have been these three areas right here for homeless children, youth, and families. And so first is really about flexible funding to ensure that we have the amount of money that we need to make sure that we have enough liaisons, right? That we have all of the tools that we need for identification, enrollment support, and also ensuring that young people are connected beyond high school, right? And so that flexible funding is really important. Also removing barriers to higher education, right? So the FAFSA, making sure that young people don't, have access to all of the forms and the things that they need to validate their homelessness, to make sure that they get funding for school, to make that process a bit easier, and also to make sure that they have housing on campus if they need it, just to ensure that they don't become homeless as, young academics. And then lastly, our third priority has been the Homeless Children and Youth Act. Okay, and so we're going to go through what all of these look like for a little bit. And so first we have flexible funding, right? And so the ask has really been advocating for $800 million with flexible funding to be the annual allocations, appropriations level moving forward. Right now, around 25% of educational institutions are actually getting funding to support young people who are homeless. That is not nearly enough. When we have a 1.1 million children that we can find, right, that are, experiencing homelessness, 25% of educational institutions is just not cutting it. And so the $800 million will ensure that everyone, every district and every school has the appropriate people in place and the funding and everything they need that's necessary to make sure that young people are being enrolled, identified, and supported both in the community and post enrollment in that educational institution. And so that $800 million investment, it's 8 times what we already get, right? So and it's more funding than the previous 10 years that we've had combined. And so we have to really do the advocacy and make sure that we advocate for this sustained funding level moving forward. And so next, this act is called the HUSHE Act. And so it's a bipartisan bill that really aims to remove barriers to higher education for young people who are experiencing homelessness. And so first, what this does is requires that each higher education institution has a liaison for homeless and foster youth. Okay, very similar to like the traditional McKinney-Vento liaison that's in the K-12. In the K-12 space, we really want that same support to be given to young people who are, trying to aspire for, higher education. And so what this act will also do is, require a plan for housing for when young people are in the full academic swing during the semesters, but also during school breaks, and that they do have priority access to on-campus housing. All right. It also makes sure that tuition is accessible and actually like attendance is accessible by providing homeless and foster youth with in-state tuition. Okay. And so there's a ton of other stuff that she does. And you guys can see the full, the full list of provisions at the link here. And so when you get the presentation, feel free to click it or just Google it and you'll be able to see the full list of provisions. And so the Homeless Children and Youth Act, so Representative Bush is a co-sponsor of this, right? And so what this does is make sure that the historic flaws that have kind of accompanied the, HUD in terms of access are fixed, right? So there has been a lot of dissonance between what people on the ground consider to be homelessness and what HUD considers to be homelessness. And so what this act does is aligns the federal definitions that include young people who are, identified by either one of the 8 federal programs, which include McKinney-Vento liaison. So you can be identified through, the K-12 space or by any of the other programs that identify for homelessness, right? And so you'll be actually eligible with that definition expansion. More young people will be eligible to receive homeless assistance from HUD. Okay. And also improves data collection. So data collection is really important in this fight. And because identification is really important in this fight. And so when you know how many young people are experiencing homelessness or how many young people are on track to experience homelessness, it makes us better advocates. It makes us better prepared to make sure that our communities are reinforced with all the resources that they need to ensure that those young people can, can succeed. Right. And so the big ask here is our ask of you, and the ask that Deidre and our other policy fellows have been asking their own legislators is really to support this flexible funding. Give us the $800 million that we easily spend on other things, right, to support our young people who are experiencing homelessness. We're also asking our legislators to co-sponsor the He/She Act, and to also co-sponsor the Homeless Children and Youth Act. And so Cori Bush is already a co-sponsor, so this is awesome, right? And so we have a bit more work to do, right? Because we want to have as many co-sponsors and as much support as we can for this bill. And so, if you don't know who your representative is, you can find out very easily by visiting www.house.gov, and you can, search your district and everything and find out who your representative is. And you can just send them a note, right? Send them an email, a text, or, tweet them and say, hey, listen, I need you to support these things, right? Because our children need it. And so I'm going to stop here for a second to see if there are any additional questions. And we have about 2 minutes left in this webinar. And I see some things are coming in the chat here, but okay, so actually there are no questions here right now, but if you do have any questions, you can maintain connection with us by signing on to our newsletter, checking out our federal policy page on the website as well, which is www.schoolhouseconnection.org. You can also email me. My email is ashanti@schoolhouseconnection.org, and my colleague Rod, who has been in the chat supporting us today, is Rod with 2 Ds at schoolhouseconnection.org. And Deidre's email is in the chat. And so you can reach out to all of us just to stay up to date on the issues and where we are in this fight. And you can also check to see, if your representative has signed on to be a co-sponsor of the bill by going to congress.gov and typing in the bill number or the name of the legislation. You can also check their social media just to see what's going on. But we do appreciate you all. We do encourage you all to support these bills and to pursue your own legislative advocacy by ensuring that your representative is representing you and your interests. And I'm assuming that everyone hopped on this call today because you care about our young people, you care about our homeless youth, and our young people who are, on track to experience homelessness. And so do this, right? Reach out to your member, your representative, and urge them to represent your interest here. And also sign up for the newsletter so you can get all of those great, all those great things. And so thank you all again. You will receive a copy of this presentation. So sorry if we were talking fast or you didn't grab everything, but we really do appreciate your time here. Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Rod. You're in the chat doing that. So yeah, but thank you so much for your time here today. We really do appreciate it. And I do look forward to connecting with you all again. So if you need to email me or have any questions about the bill or the definitions or, what you can do and how exactly to get in touch with your legislators, please let us know and we'll do all that we can to support you. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. It is a Friday, so have a great weekend and I hope to connect with you all soon.